Hello, hello. We are your hosts at Sundays Are for Contemplation. I'm Sophia,
And I'm Nicole.
and this is our episode 7 with Andrés del Vecchio. Hi, Andrés.
Hey guys, I didn't
Uh,
know it was episode 7. That's a great number
yes,
on a
it
great
is.
day for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're having you here on the podcast today to do a little interview with you about our residency that we're currently involved with, Primavera Digitale. And we just wanted to get to know a little bit about your experience and to also introduce you to our viewers as an artist and, yeah, just kind of getting to know each other.
Sure. Um, so my name is Andrés del Vecchio. I'm a Venezuelan-born artist. I'm an oil painter, and my work revolves around a very funny little subgenre of I think it's surrealism. I try not to make up names like on the spot. That's for when I'm dead. But like it's my work is mostly about exploring surrealism and Western Hermeticism and exploring different parts of my memory or things that I'm interested in or things that I get locked into at the time and finding ways to transport those themes into or out of my imagination, right? Like it's I tend to meditate a lot, and I tend to use my meditation as an excuse to daydream and go into a lot of places that would otherwise be inaccessible. So the paintings are kind of a result of that and are talismans to go back into those places. Should I put them in front of myself or put them in front of other people?
Right.
I'm trying to make it make sense as much as possible, but
No, no,
that's the long and the short of it.
it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah. And do you want to tell us a little bit about maybe your artistic journey and how you came to this conclusion about your artwork and that this is what you're creating? Like, what big influences did you have in your life that sort of led you down this path?
Oh, absolutely. I was very lucky that from a very early age, I was exposed to a lot of art. My grandparents are Venezuelan and Venezuelan born, and they are collectors themselves of a lot of Venezuelan artists. And so when I was very little, like I would be with my grandfather in particular, and he would take me to all of the museums whenever we would be in Caracas or whenever we would travel. And so I saw a lot of pieces very early on, seeing the Goya black paintings in Spain at the Prado, and traveling around and into New York, where my those same grandparents had a very small studio apartment that I think they must have gotten at an absolute steal when they did get it, and it was happened to be right next to the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Oh,
So
wow.
I would be going when I wasn't in Venezuela. I would be in New York City, and I would be going to the museum, spending extraordinary amounts of time. Funnily enough, not in the painting area, although my grandfather always made a point to take me there. But more often, I would hang out in the Egyptian, the temple that brick by brick had been brought over. It was stolen, like it was actually probably stolen from Egypt, and so you have this very strange kind of temple that just sits in the Met. And now that I'm older, it's a bit of a strange experience to go there, because when I was younger, I don't remember seeing as many people just milling about on their cell phones, but really being struck and in awe of this place where you had everything from sarcophagi to the temple itself with still water and everything there, and these little like little altars and things that to me just stretched my imagination so far, and eventually this got me into various other mythologies, but that really kickstarted my journey was to have a grandpa who has since passed away, but who was always like remarking and encouraging me to draw and to paint and to do everything. And whenever I would, we had a very good understanding of one another, and whenever I would make something, I would show it to him, and he was he's normally a very cold man, I think, to my mother and my aunts and uncles, but with me we had a very kind of sacred relationship where he would just celebrate it to everybody who was around. And so he was a very encouraging force in my life across the years. I got into painting in high school, and he was the one that when I won a particular competition that took me to Washington, D.C. to exhibit a painting, he was the one that came with me, he and my grandmother. And
Wow.
so that was really like, I was just encouraged from a young age, and that my interest took me towards naturally, very naturally towards mysticism, mythology, and places that can now only really exist in mental space.
Yeah. Was he a painter as well, or did your grandfather, was he just an appreciator of the
He
arts?
was definitely an appreciator. He
Mm.
was a doctor, and he he was a gastroenterologist. So I don't know how that what digestion has to do with with
Yeah.
painting, but he no, I think what's funny is like all of his sons tried to become musicians in some way, and then got caught in. He had no respect for musicians at all. But because he was already an avid collector and was creating relationships with painters, I think that I may have been the only blood relation of his that was like, oh, I'm going to do this. And I think that I got very lucky that he had ingratiated himself with the artistic community and said, oh, this is a path. Like, I have friends that do this. I have friends that collect art. Like, there's 100% a way to do it. And it's funny to come to grips with that now that I'm older, of like how lucky I was to have those specific circumstances to make art making a possibility in the first place.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, that's super amazing. I did want to ask, I know you said your like medium is painting um I wanted to see like how did you get onto like I guess like on-chain art, or like what was your journey with that?
Oh, well, so as far as on-chain art is concerned, I made the probably very ill-advised decision to become an independent, um, what do you call it? I made the decision where like art is my thing and my only thing, and I made that very dramatic decision, as many people do in their 20s, and it is especially ill-advised in your 20s when you don't have a job. So I had spent the better part of, I think, from 2018 all the way up to early 2021 trying to find different modes to sell my art, which unfortunately brought me into areas of, like commission work,
Hmm.
portraits for a lot of, like I trying to network within my family and who my family knew, and then getting caught doing very dry, very boring portrait work that would that kills the soul. And so what happened was that I got to a certain point where I was like, this is not working. I am really, if this is success, then it is entirely unenjoyable success. I need to find a way out of this. I need to find some way to succeed on my own terms, and really stick to my vision, and not be on anyone else's, not have anyone else hanging over me. And so what happened was that I'd happened to start a very deep uh, reprogramming through hardcore, very hardcore meditation and Western Hermeticism, and learning about money, and very much investigating what it was that I wanted out of art. Right, it's because I didn't know at the time until I investigated. I was like, I did not want to be an artist that died broke, and then we speak about in mythological terms, and oh my god, can you believe he cut off his ear, or like, oh my god, can you believe he died of herpes in Tahiti? Like, no, I didn't want that to be my life. So I started investigating what successful people were doing, that had come before me, and then especially investigating what successful people I knew that were in the arts were doing now, and comparing the two. And it drew me towards um, a friend of mine whose sister Almendra was already very successful. Almendra Bertoni, who's a very successful artist in the space and also a painter, who had been succeeding and selling tons of art for five figures,
Hmm.
just through the blockchain. No representation through a gallery. No need to make all these connections. Just making art and then being able to sell it. Just prior to the big bull run of 2021, and then the bull run hit, crypto art was all everything I could read about, right? So imagine you're meditating, you're like, I want to be really successful, and then suddenly out of nowhere, doing all this magic and meditation, there's this new medium and new way of selling art. And not only that, but I also know someone who's succeeding off of it. So
Hmm.
I just I called my friend. I said, can you please give me your sister's number? And he's like, are you trying to hit on my sister? I was like, no, I'm taken. I need to talk to her immediately about this thing. She knows way more than I do, and like I know nothing. Like I need someone that can at least tell me what to do. And we spent 3 hours on the phone, and we've been super friends ever since. Really, like she's awesome. She's hanging out in London right now and doing cool things. And like, yeah, Amendra is just an amazing person, and I'm really grateful that she took the time to explain so much of it. A lot of it came pretty easy afterwards. Like a wallet, it all looks very strange because of all the jargon, but it was not a hard thing to do. Harder was probably building a presence online and learning how to ingratiate myself into the conversation without trying to you know buy me, like sell something to someone, especially
Yeah.
something as sacred as art. It's kind of what's the word, it's a difficult learning curve to learn how to talk about art and around art in order to find that piece of art's home, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course. I just want to say you're an amazing storyteller.
you
Oh,
are.
thank you.
Maybe it's a Latino in you, but yeah, like amazing. But I did want to ask you. I know you said that while you were meditating and like deciding what kind of artist you wanted to be, like what were those characteristics exactly, or like maybe not characteristics, or like goals that you were like, okay, I see that. I mean, obviously financial gain, as you were talking about with your friend.
Financial, yeah.
But is there
All the
any?
gain. Give me all the money. What were they? I still have this statement. I look at it like every morning or every other morning before I meditate.
Mhm.
And it's like my what do you call it? It's like a true north statement is a very nice way to put it.
Mhm.
But it's still the same, which is that I want the financial freedom to be able to travel when I like,
Mhm.
and I would like it's obvious it's the financial freedom to have a great home, to raise a great family with my fiance, and to be able to have artwork in the museums that I grew up in, right? And to have a group of collectors, curators, and critics that understand my work and love me and nurture me and take me where I want to go. You know what I mean? And help me grow and prosper, and having those people be my best friends for the rest of my life, right? It's like that's really the goal, right?
Mhm.
And that has not really changed. I think the only thing that may have changed on the list is that California is on fire, so I can't have my villa on the mountainside in Malibu anymore. But like, I can
Yeah.
still, I can still have a few things, Like I can. There are definitely some lists of. I think it's more of a. If I look at it for too long, it becomes a list of demands for God. So like, I try to just like a fuck. Try to be as I try not to be humble with that list though, because it's I was just like, what do I want? And I think that that was very key to moving me in the direction that I'm in at the moment.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I find it so fascinating how so many people in this community are actually very spiritual or have had moments like encounters with luck that have just propelled them further into this space. And I know, for
I hope
example,
so.
with Sinbad, if I don't know if you were at the space yesterday that we had on Twitter,
I
but he was,
missed it. I got in at the last 5 minutes like an asshole, and I was like, I missed all the sandwich talk.
yeah, we were talking just about pigeons for an hour,
Oh,
and
that's great. That's a great. That's even. I'm now. I'm even more upset.
but you just
Oh,
have to bring up to him speaking Italian to pigeons, and he'll tell you all about it. But I remember whenever he recounts to us about how, especially he felt his like first motivations, it was propelled a lot by like random synchronicities that would occur. And I
hmm
think it's so important too for like people to, like you said, like you have these demands for yourself, but it's also because you recognize that you're worthy of it and you are. And I think it's like right now we're all so intentional with what we're doing and we just really want to make this community feel close. And I actually want to ask you a little bit, moving towards like getting closer to the residency, how did you encounter the people who are part of the residency, like Sinbad, K? Like what kind of led
oh,
you closer
so
here?
many delicious nuggets couched in that. There's just so much good and so much flavor in everything you just said. We could talk for probably ages about the inherent relationship between, um, you know, magic manifestation, mysticism, and the arts, and how they're tied together. And you can, perceivably draw a link between them through history. But like Sinbad and I think it was Mariano.
Yeah.
So I met them first. I knew of them, right? Everyone in this space knows of each other to one extent or another, right?
Mhm.
So I knew of them already, but I believe it was last year. It was my second or third time going to the Canal Street show. Um, and every time, and the Canal Street show is in, for those that don't know, it's in Manhattan, it's in Soho. It's a very incredible, like, callback to the New York of the 80s, 90s, 2000s loft show, like things that don't really exist anymore because it's the cost of living is currently very expensive in most of New York City, so you don't see as much, but it's like brick and mortar walls, like hastily painted ceilings, wood floors, and several floors worth of just art and good conversation and cheap wine. And
Mhm.
packed,
Always keep
yeah,
wine.
it's like
Always
wall to
wine.
wall. You're just drinking crappy prosecco, but it becomes worth its weight in gold because of the sheer good conversation and the connections that can happen. And I
Yeah.
learned very early on that, like, I work best in social situations for art shows to simply set up an easel and get to painting, and then I don't have to make as many introductions and go through little icebreakers and small talk. It's
Mhm.
like bringing a tarot card to a party. Like, you like whoever's on the other end of your tarot deck, you're gonna get to know, and it'll be like a therapy session, or being in a car ride for 3 hours with someone. Like, something about painting in front of other people allows them to open up more to me and me to them. And I don't know what it is about that, but I was painting a very small study of the archangel Michael,
Mhm.
who's like a cornerstone of a particular set of daily rituals that I do. And I was painting this, and Sinbad was not yet in his full, like, attire. He had not yet masked out, with the raven skull and all the cool shit that he wears. But Mariano was hanging out, and they were just setting up for the show, and I was just painting, and I overheard them speaking Spanish, just like how we did in this conversation, and we just started talking, and from there we just, just like any good relationship in the space, it was like little by little. I was not, not really asking anything of each other, but it was like, I see you, hey, how's it going? I mean, like, and then piano, 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 piano. We just, here we are. We're like, I'm in the residency, like, and yeah, it's very natural, very nothing forced, which is exactly how I like my any good
Mhm.
friendship to begin. Is like, none of it was me breaking down any walls or anything like that. It was just showing face and being who I am, and not being afraid of that. It worked out great. Here we are, right? And in a few months, there will be.
I always forget that Mariano has actually been there for the origin of almost everything.
Mhm.
It's because right now, I mean, we're working with Mariano, and for us, since we've been doing a lot of things in Europe recently, and he's in the US, like
Yeah.
we always FaceTime him and call him into the events, but like he's not never there in person. So for us to like, we're like, oh my god,
Oh,
Mariano in
Yeah.
person, we miss
so
you.
jealous you guys say that you're in Europe right now. Oh my god. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I would imagine.
hmm Well, me and Nicole are full time here in Madrid, where the last few exhibitions have been made.
Yeah. So
Yeah. But I'm just also, this is random, but I'm so happy that we're all Latinos here because I just feel like for me, it's like my people, you know?
Yep.
And the fact that you're also from Venezuela, I was like, oh my God, like my brother. So,
Yeah, yeah, me too, me too. There was something about when I heard about like 30 Campos and Wait and Hope. There is something about knowing that there is a great amount of Latin American presence, in its voice and in its DNA. I was like, man, I've been waiting. Do you know what I mean? It's very different to encounter that in a cryptosphere that is so. I won't say that it's mostly, the big voices are mostly American, because that's wrong, and yet it still feels very American and Anglo-centric.
yeah.
yeah.
Where, like, some of my favorite art is like it's Italian, it's Spanish, it's Latin American. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
some of the best shows that I've been to, when it comes down to it, are, if you go to you're in New York City and you go to a Sotheby's or a Christie's and they have an auction, it's like really the coolest auctions, which are really just secret
Mhm.
shows of artwork that is just changing hands. The best shows are the Latin American, Latin American art collections. They just Latin American and contemporary, like art collections are always the coolest to see pop up out of nowhere. You always see the most daring
Yeah.
works of, like, painting and sculpture. But that's a whole other
Yeah.
thing. All I mean to say is that I love that. I love the flavor of the group.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, definitely. I feel like like you said, maybe it was like rare to see like a lot of Latinos in the space, but I think it's just natural. Like we're always
Mhm.
involved in art, and we're always like I think as a cultural just
We're very,
mix of everything. Like
yeah,
we just have to create, and I feel
Yep.
like art is such a natural thing in like the societal values of the different Latino cultures. Like this had to happen, you know. It was
it was only
it was
natural.
only natural for
Of
us to
course.
start taking over the space.
Yeah.
Of course. Of course. There's something about the Latin American and romance language, countries. So it's a big group right there. But like the way that, I look at things through painting and what is produced through painting, and like the sheer fire, like the sheer creative fire, the way that the paint is applied. Like there's just so much soul in it that I end up, if I'm ever in a rut, I go and I just look at, like, artists from a different, like I ended up finding by accident in a library a book of a bunch of paintings that had been made for Caracas's Palace of Justice, right?
Mhm.
And was introduced to all these painters I had never seen before, but these were works that had the gesture of a Goya. Like
Wow.
these were works where it's like the paint stopped being, paint is just really like jelly if you really get down to it. It's just dust emulsified in linseed oil. And like, but the paint stroke, it stopped being this weird, like liquid solid, and suddenly became fire. Like it was this incredible thing to find. And I find that that's always the case when I find new Latin American artists to follow, that they paint with fire. Anyway, sorry, I may have
Yeah,
gone on a
no,
tangent.
again, I think you're an amazing storyteller, and
Yeah.
like
I'm
I feel like I'm
hiking.
listening to the podcast.
No, me too.
Like,
Every word
you
here.
guys, you guys flatter me. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you guys have me on.
So I was actually too on the residency, the first session that we had. I remember there's a few comments that you were making that I was just like laughing, and it was, I feel like it started off with being a little bit like academic. I think no one was really sure that they could like kind of burst in,
yeah.
and then you were making your comments, and it just made the space more like fun and I feel like casual but
Well,
still on
yeah, because I
topic.
mean, we've spoken with like the group of the artists that we are kind of assigned to, and
Hmm.
to help them out, and we could tell like a lot of them are a lot shyer, and they're like, no, everyone in this residency is so smart, and I'm scared of saying anything, and I
Yep.
think you have the capacity of saying very intelligent things and making them very like intimate, you know, like not
You,
something that's like scary. And I feel like you definitely broke the ice and made it like a
Yeah.
guys, this is like we're here to have really interesting conversations, but we're not gonna be like intellectual dicks about it, you know? Like I don't know how
you honor me seriously, like truly, because for me, I just I know the kind of conversations that I want to have, and I also know that most artists, and having, I thrive on the Twitter Spaces feature, even though it's kind of dead at the moment. But like, Twitter Spaces, Discords, that sort of thing
Hmm.
made me realize that very early on is like, oh, like most artists, it's very clear most artists obviously want to be in the studio making art, and then when it comes time to talk about their art, it's like they've been in a cave for like years and years and years at a time, and there's a lot of ums and uhs and do you know what I mean, and a lot of monologuing that tends to happen.
Yeah.
And I found that my favorite, I did my share of it, and I probably still do, but like I found that my favorite artist conversations are the ones that conversations between artists, collectors, all that, the ones that happen at like 3 a.m. when it's like we've gone through all the weighty topics and we're just like sitting there and just joking, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
having a good time. Because then suddenly, after all the laughter, the conversation has this moment where it deepens.
Yeah.
And I was trying to get there, as I hope I didn't try to rush it, but like that's what I'm trying to, when I'm in spaces, or when I'm, we're having meetings, like it is where I want to get to. It's very clear that other people do too.
You're
but
kind of like simulating when the cheap wine has hit, but you just
yeah, exactly.
yeah, you've just found the life hack.
Yes, but once the hash blunt has made its rotation and everyone's had their, you know, however much amount of money is the prosecco and maybe a little snack, everybody's chilling. Everybody's having a great time. That's what
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the most, honestly.
I'm saying maybe we should incorporate it into like the residency. Like I was asking
I
open bar.
mean, I'm not gonna say
First,
I plead the fifth on whether I'm already incorporating any of that into the recipe already,
Yeah.
but you know.
I plead the fifth on the temptation I had earlier. So
she was like, I really want a Bloody Mary, and I was like,
Dude, do it. I'm telling you, because we're talking about some very dreamlike conversations happening a lot of the time in the residency. Like, what are we doing talking about? Hey,
it's okay,
edit
we
that now.
can edit
Edit it out. What are we doing talking about? Beep. So,
it.
what are we doing talking about these rarefied topics and all of these different subject matters? Because we have readings and we have a lot of there's a lot of great, I think, curation going
Mhm.
on in terms of the residency and its aims. I mean, we are all of us in it, and all of you guys organizing it are trying to really trying, and I applaud this so much because for Godspeed, like trying to create and make real the promise of this moment, which is that we are in a digital renaissance. It's same but different to the one that occurred, you know, in the Cinquecento and so on, and like all these hundreds of years. There are these ideas that are trying to come around again in an era of great ignorance, right? They're ideas that we're trying to percolate in the midst of a casino and in the midst of a lot of chaos, and I think that is like super laudable, and it's also what is, when you think back on all these moments, it's residencies like these where there's again a lot of curation on the topic, a lot of like trying to steer a lot of really big, really cool ideas, and like, man, I'm just very excited by it. I'm very excited by Wait and Hope and 30 Campos that you guys are all doing, and um, it's something that is lacking, very much lacking in this space, because artists do have conversations in this space. Like I said, there's already formats for big, gigantic, long calls with multiple people on at a time, where everybody suddenly has to raise their hand because it's becoming very disorganized. And I know the conversations that happen, and the conversations that happen are not like this. They're more about, how do I succeed as an artist? What do we do? There's a bear market, there's a bull market, there's whatever other animal themed, finance bro terminology comes into the market. This coin is up and this coin is down, and yet, the conversations that matter, they don't happen until late into the night, and they're clearly not the spotlight, right? And this is the complete opposite of what this residency is about, where like we're talking very much about very high-minded aspirations and high-minded ways of thinking, and yeah, it's just so welcome. Like it's so welcome. Like it's turning me back towards where I was 10 years ago, because I'd been to Florence. Like I spent a good year in Florence, a really really good year, and I promptly went to New York to erase it all, and it was it's just amazing to get back into this consciousness that still exists. You know what I mean? These ideas are still fresh. These paintings are still fresh.
Yeah.
These altar pieces for the paintings are so fresh. The buildings are so fresh. The architecture is so fresh. Like everything is so deliberate and intentional, and really looking towards and succeeding at bringing forth ideas that last for now, how many, 500, 600 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's an amazing thing. We should be thinking like this at almost all times, really, and I'm glad that we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that creating work within this context, like having the historical background of an art movement, being able to have philosophical discussions about it, that creating work in this context will differ from not having a community to sort of like really hone in on these ideas about?
Yes, 100%, 100%. I mean, there are some ideas that artists, I can tell you from experience, like there are some things that I would want to play with that I'm almost waiting for permission to play with, whether it's like mythology or like anything that's been quote unquote dead and done before. Artists are afraid to do, right? I find that there's a lot of pressure to be timely and of the moment, and yet I find a lot of art that I see does not hit. And
Yeah.
so like residencies like this, curation, really, like when you talk about a curator, you talk about a gallery, or you talk about an art dealer, you talk about the people that manifest in an artist's life and push them and pull them um, in the direction that the artist may resist, but ultimately it's usually where they want to go when they have a good team like this. That's happening in this residency. Like this is a very, 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 very romantic and very different way of thinking compared to, let's say, if you went into this space now and if I found an artist and you're like mentor the artist, right? Like mentor the artist, Dre. And so I go, okay, I'm Andrés Vecchio. I'll be your teacher today. And what you're going to do is you're going to ingratiate yourself with all these people that might not have any understanding of art. And some of that may mean occasionally, you may be tempted to make work that feeds into them, right? You might be tempted to make a Pepe, or you might be tempted to make something that has to do with this or that, contemporary figure that now there's a bit of hot gossip, like Beeple, right? His every day, there's a bit of hot gossip, make a one a day, right? Like that kind of stuff. And I think that a true curator, a true patron, anyone that's really looking at like an artist and looking at the career and looking long term, sometimes an artist is not afforded to look long term, and it may be a patron's role to be like, look, like, yes, and if they have if a curator or whoever is talking to an artist, they've been taken into that artist's confidence. It's a really beautiful thing for an artist to, let's say, share this doubt that I'm speaking of now, and for the person in front of them to be like, yes, you could do that, Pepe. Sure you can, absolutely you can, no worries, make the frog. But like, when 10 years from now, is that something that you'll look back on with pride? Is it something that you'll flip through and wave off? Is it something that if it does become very successful, do you want it to define your career? And more importantly, what are the ideas that you want to define your body of work? If you died tomorrow, like what would you want what would you want your work to say about you? And I think that those are maybe using the word wrong, saturnine conversations that don't happen often enough. But the way that we're having those conversations in the residency is a lot more, I think, a lot better handed, where it's like, look, these are people that are dead, and they succeeded, and some of them worked on pieces where they only worked on one piece and it was for 15 years, and it's known forever, and it's made with perfect precision, and they were able to do that because of this culture of patronage, right? Granted, there's a whole bunch of historical context there, and the amount of richness that was in Florence and Italy at the time, but those are conversations that artists should have with themselves at all times, unless they're awesome and very nihilistic and they just don't care, right? I mean, like, there are plenty that I love the beauty of their nihilism, like I like a die with the most likes in the Beeple, like as much as anybody else, you know what I mean? And they do end up telling very timeless tales with their work, right? They do manage to touch on some great themes. I think die with the most likes more than Beeple, but that's a whole other conversation. But like, yeah, we're doing a lot of good here right now. I think there was a little, without talking too much on the theme of the show, I do also think that sometimes a great, a group like this, a group of patrons, are like, the idea that sometimes they also put an obstacle for artists to get over, right? Like, here's the theme that I need you to do. You are free to interpret it how you want, and like, it has, the artist may never have tackled said theme before, or never thought of tackling said theme before. Maybe their medium is, the way they were exploring their medium has no, they're forced into this quandary of like, how do I respond to this thing that I didn't think I was going to end up doing? And that is beautiful also. You know what I mean? Like, seeing how an artist might find a way around around that obstacle is cool too. And sometimes that opens up entire new vistas of creativity as well. It's cool. What's happening here is very cool.
I'm also excited because I think on that comment on the artist that worked like 15 years to produce something and his work is like transcendental, it's been everlasting and it's still impacting us today. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to foment with the residency is like creating art that is intentional and transcendental. And I was just kind of thinking, like you said on the Pepe comment, that sort of art was a fad. And I think a lot of just appreciators of art took it as that. And of course, it has its impact in the art movement. It will forever be known as something that occurred. But I would like to know kind of what you, at least for yourself, intend for viewers of your final art project to understand, and just kind of what you think um, how other people will interpret what comes out of this residency not being artists themselves.
Ooh, that's a
Um, without well, without speaking too deeply. Again, we have to avoid speaking too deep. We got to keep everything hush hush and sexy, right? So
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, so keeping it 100 without mentioning anything about our shadowy theme, our multi-veiled subject matter. I think that what I'm intending to do and what I usually intend to do first and foremost is like almost all of my pieces function the same way that I think most art has always functioned, which is that this is an altarpiece. Like,
Mhm.
and I've always had that in my head when I create something. Is like I am creating an object where ideally, if you wanted to view my paintings, I want you to have a chair ready or a nice sofa, maybe a nice divan, and you're just sitting back and you have a glass of wine or you have a joint or you have you just by yourself, which is even better. And I want you to look at the painting and let it just stare back into you. Like let it freeze you. Like let the line work, the brush work, the subject matter, the symbols placed therein. I want it all to overload your system so that if you were really thinking about something that day, you're no longer thinking about it. And I want you to contemplate, if possible, some those symbols, those colors, whatever I'm using, and just to see where it takes you. Like ideally, I want you to look at a painting of mine, spend as much time with it as you want, and then
Mhm.
close your eyes and see where your imagination takes you after seeing this image. Because I really think that most of the works in these churches, obviously they're telling beautiful stories. There's a moral to it, and there's all these things, but like anytime that I've seen any painting in Italy in particular, um,
Mhm.
any church, it will stop you cold in your tracks. It makes something happen where those paintings, any pick a painting, pick a church, doesn't matter. It could be in the sticks in Italy, and those paintings, they what's the word? They change. They bring you up a gear in your mind, in your imagination. Like they change your emotions. They change the way that you think. They change the way that you act. They change the way that you talk when you're in front of a painting like that. So that is my goal with my works, if that makes sense. I
No,
think
that
that's art's goal in general, to be
no,
honest.
I think that comparison is like super amazing because at least me, like I'm not an artist in that sense, but I growing up like Mexican, I went to a church a lot, and I'm not a super religious person, but even as a kid, like I was just like you said, captivated by the art. The only reason I was interested at all, I mean, I wouldn't pay attention to what was being spoken, but I was just staring at the art.
Me
This
neither.
is
I had I was raised Jewish, so I had the same. I had my own version of Sunday school. It just didn't have as much
Mhm.
cosmic agony.
Mhm.
A same kind of guilt, but a different kind.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just remember like staring at like the art pieces, and that was honestly like staring at like beautiful things and just being completely captivated. I guess that's as
Mhm.
spiritual as I ever got at the age of 8. And then I would go get an ice cream afterwards. My grandparents were
Oh
going.
hell yeah!
But you
Yeah.
know, the fact that it could like captivate someone so young that, and I guess kind of like, let's say like tabula rasa,
Yeah.
like completely like, I guess like brain not influenced by a lot of things and
Mhm.
still, somehow have an influence. I understand. I think the comparison that you want your art is super, super, super cool. Like,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really liked like your explanation of it, and I hope that people who listen to this who are just art appreciators like take some time to reflect and think about how they view art. Because this, when you were just describing, like looking at an art piece by yourself, drinking a glass of wine, that's personally something that I've never done except for like Nicole, for example. We're filming this in her home, and she has this piece by Omar Huerta. So besides like the few times I've just been sipping a coffee in the
You
morning
just do
waiting for
it.
her, I would like contemplate this piece, and it's so beautiful. And it's just, for me, art has always, I grew up with art being a sort of adornment because
Mhm.
like your grandfather impacted you with art, my grandmother did for me. She littered her houses with different painters, and she would always support like all these types of artists. And every time I would look at a painting, whether it be just like in a hallway, like it was always the positioning too, because it's what's the difference between one that's in a hallway versus the
Oh
a
yeah,
balcony or a room, and it's just every single artwork transmits something so differently, and it's so, there's so much to it.
100%. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you and say I'm sure you and I had the same experience
Mhm.
because my grandparents, for all that I've blown them up a bit, their taste is slightly. I mean, they're very tasteful people. God
Mhm.
rest my grandfather's soul and my currently still living grandmother. But
Oh,
the painting that hit me very hard when I was young that they still have, you guys are gonna crack up. It's literally just a boob in
oh
a
my
landscape orientation with like a like a house on the rib cage, just
God.
like just absolutely ridiculous thing.
Surrealist.
But Dina, my fiance, is here. It's very surrealist, but it's like
It's a realist. It's a surrealist tit landscape.
yes, it is a surrealist tit landscape, my love, absolutely. So it's like that one hit me super hard because I'm seeing it every day, and you really are living with art. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like an actual big art collectors that are old talking
Mm,
about their art collections that they've had for a while that they might have to like move something about or sell something, and the agony on those faces and in those voices. It's like they're talking about having to dropping off their children at college. Um,
yeah.
but like, yeah, so I want you to imagine again this ridiculous surrealist boob landscape, and like contemplating the idea of woman as landscape, right, is already inherent in that. Woman as earth, right? The interconnectivity, right, of that seemingly simple but very powerful spiritual concept. It's like that's the one that stayed with me. It wasn't the painting of watermelons on a table. It wasn't this or that other like portrait. It was this one here hit really hard.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's those kinds of things where like when you're really living with even bad art is good, right? But like it does change. You have to
Yeah.
see this image. It's not a television. You're not on your phone. Like it's the static image that is transmitting something that you can if it's any good, you'll come back to it many times, and not only will it cut you to the quick and cease all thought and cease all language from such a powerful image, but it'll also when you're done with it, it will make your imagination go and potentially recontextualize it or recontextualize different parts of your life, find different bits of poetry and meaning. Like
Mhm.
art is maybe the headiest drug there is,
Mm.
in my opinion. Most of the times, it's enough. Like I said, if next time you're in front of a great piece, like stare at it for like just count to however much, a minute, 5 minutes, and then just close your eyes and then just like sit there. I do this at the Met whenever I go, and I find something that hits me. And unfortunately, the only things that really hit me are the things that were made by dead men and women from 500 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, I'll sit if there's a bench. I'm sitting on that bench. You will find me just sitting down and closing my eyes on that bench. I'm doing exactly what you're probably not supposed to do in a museum, which is taking up a lot of space. But like that is, I think that's really the goal of all this is to create points of reference that people can respond to and
Yeah.
inevitably get something out of. Like there's no way out of that. Unfortunately, no way out of that drug once you've taken it.
I remember, this is again a more random side note, but there was an actress that became a professor at NYU or something like that. And I remember seeing quotes about her sending her homework to her students of going to the Met or whichever museum it was and just staring down a painting for 3 hours not moving, just looking at it.
Only an actor or actress could be like, make it the most impossible task you've ever had. Like,
Yeah.
make it as dramatic as you possibly can. Like 3 minutes, more like 3 hours. Let's see if you're man or woman enough to do this shit. Like, only actors, man.
Yeah. Actors in themselves, that's like performance art is also so expressive.
Oh,
Like,
man.
yeah,
We could
that's
go so deep in that hole of like experimental theater and what acting, look, like I said earlier, it's like I really do believe that all art is inherently tied to magic and mysticism and either altering something within you or altering something outside of you. And actors, we think about like method actors, right? Like to pick somebody that even Lana Del Rey, right, who's like technically method acting to produce an album, right? Or Daniel Day Lewis, it's like you are literally embodying an entire human being and the ideas that they represent. There is no more greater an act of willpower and change that you could enact on yourself. That's crazy.
yeah.
3 hours in front of a painting, though, is absolutely absurd. No one needs to spend 3 hours in front of a painting. I'm sorry. You can if you like it. If you're like, oh yes, I'm stoned and having this shamanic experience. Like I said, if you can finally close your eyes and just be there for 3 hours, I completely agree. But that's absurd.
Yeah, especially with everyone's attention spans
Yeah.
nowadays,
Oh
it's
my
very
gosh.
hard to do that.
And I noticed my attention span is like 2 minutes too, so I think I would have lost my
Your hand twitching over to your cell phone like it's a Gone to the Wild West movie. Like I mean, your fingers
trying to
moving
scroll like
all
if
the
it's
directions.
Yeah, but
so what was the point of just staring at the painting for 3 hours?
she was just saying like see what you take away from it, and I guess it was just like to challenge what everyone else would say nowadays about art. You know what
She's
I mean?
asking for meditation. Actually, I mean, I don't see what's wrong. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. You are trying to both penetrate and allow yourself to be penetrated by this piece of art,
Yeah.
and that is like to release into that is very it's very Venusian, which means nothing in the context of this conversation, but like it's like to be able to surrender to everything inherent in that work. I get it. I mean, I can probably make legitimate any ridiculous idea, but like I could be like I kind of understand, but I'm like 3 hours. Maybe I'm sure it wasn't 3 hours. I'm sure we're just talking in terms of a relative amount of time. But like, can you imagine spending 3 hours in front of, say, I'm choose a very masculine painting. Let's do Saturn devouring his son, right, from the famous Goya black painting, or like the Witch's Sabbath. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With or any of those, and you're like at the Prado right now, and you're just like, I'm gonna sit in front of these and see what comes up about the man who made these paintings, the color, my associations with those colors, the line work, the brush work. Some of those paintings are very stormy brushwork, like I said, very fiery. It's like, what if I close my eyes? What comes up unbidden that is almost entirely unrelated to this painting is also an equally beautiful and probably even more powerful experience. That's a true mystical experience, right? So you look at this painting, and what you get off of it is actually quite the opposite of anything related to the painting. Is also usually what happens in those situations, right? You might be sitting in front of this painting of Saturn and be thinking of something completely different. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Could be cool. I'm jealous of you guys. You guys are able to. You guys said you're in Madrid.
Yeah, we are.
I didn't. If I doxed you by accident, I'm sorry. But like, yeah,
No,
guys,
no.
I think
I would kill to go to the Prado. Like today, if you're like today we go to the Prado, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Did we? No, we're going right now.
I should actually go back because I haven't been in a while.
Oh, jealous.
Because of you, I'm gonna go.
Yes.
It's just gonna stare
Oh
at
my
a
God,
painting
yes.
for 3 hours.
I love seeing Guernica, or it's not
no,
Reina
that's
Sofia.
Sophia.
I mixed up my museums, my Madrid museums.
Guernica's crazy. I made a copy of Guernica once for a different painting. When I first entered the space, I had a painting that had been half finished for years. And I finally had this click. It was a painting of Frankenstein awakening his monster, right? The son that he realizes later he never wanted. And I finally figured out that like the body of the figure of Dr. Frankenstein, Victor, is like all tweaked out. But it's also this like the creature. I couldn't figure out what to do with the creature. And then eventually something hit me. I think somebody passed by while I was carrying the painting around and traveling with it and stopped me and was like, that looks like Pablo Picasso. Because it did. It had the hair flipped to the side and he's all
Mhm.
sweaty and he's got that very Spanish intensity about him. And yeah. And so I tried copying that painting and like, it made me appreciate I think that unlocked my appreciation for Picasso was actually copying Guernica and having that relationship of like looking at this painting and letting thoughts come as they went, and like what what a truly beautiful painting it is. Like horrifying when you look at it because it allows you to make your own associations. Like that cartoon horse,
Mhm.
like screaming, like is a crazy one. Everyone's in such pain, but like obviously he's not depicting something real. He's depicting something monumental. And
Yeah.
I get it, man. I get it. I do. He stripped it down to its bare components, and
Mhm.
it's it's why it's one of the best paintings of the past century.
Yeah.
I absolutely love Picasso, and I just know that sometimes when it comes to very famous artists, people love to have negative opinions to be like counterculture, but there's really
Yeah, that's because they don't. I mean, like he was a piece of shit. You kind of have to always preface when you talk about Picasso is like he was a terrible guy. But we have almost every generation has their share of like, look at this
Mhm.
brilliant imagination that came from this terrible guy.
Yeah.
And you can't throw a rock without hitting a terrible guy or girl that has made something truly beautiful. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm surprised. We haven't even talk about Caravaggio and things like that. For whatever reason, the scandal does help them live forever to some degree. But like, what a brilliant way of like, kind of like I think of Picasso in the way that I think of Mozart.
Mhm.
Um, when we talk about the work, because you're talking about someone that from a very early age, he was educated in painting by his dad, who was a painter, and quickly outstripped his dad. Like I can only imagine taking a truly brilliant, gifted kid and giving them tools and instruction and seeing what happens over time. Because like Mozart, also, he was raised from a young age by a composer, and that's why when he came time to paint and or to compose, they would play. You know what I mean? This would be easy, and eventually, that form of play was outstripped by a different kind of play. I mean, new structures, new ways of, especially Spanish, deconstructing, right, and only taking away the essentials. Of very, 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 to me, a very Spanish thing, right? Even Goya taking away color, right? It's like for Picasso, it's can you do it in three brushstrokes, right? Or like can you do it black and white? Can you do it without depicting the human form? Which obviously we haven't been doing it for since we could walk. In like these stylized forms and still communicate something that resonates with the people around you.
Mhm.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. We got to see. Me and my father went on a trip to go to the Dali house and museum, and we had to fly through Barcelona. And it was a very beautiful bonding trip because my dad equally was the one that introduced me more to surrealism. So going to this house was beautiful, but we unexpectedly dropped our way into this Picasso museum, and we got to see just a brilliant head become an old master at a very young age. Obviously, like with all the brushstroke, all the Goya, everything, and then blooming and blossoming in this complete other direction, right? Of total power and mastery. It's wild, like truly. He's a truly wild artist. Terrible person, but if you can't look at painting and not look at Picasso and
Yeah.
not be struck,
No, for sure. I completely agree.
he
I've
cuts
learned.
you. That guy, he really cuts you.
But I definitely like have learned to respect Picasso. Aesthetically, he's not my favorite, but I living in Spain, I do respect him a lot, and his work is really cool. But
Piece
I
of
do,
shit, though. I feel like we're in a comedy show. You know what I mean? It's like you kind of have you have to at the end of it.
yeah. Well, I did want to ask you something because I know I spoke to Sinbad, and I believe you told me that you used to live in Florence and you studied there a bit. So I wanted to
Yes.
ask, what does it feel like to well be exhibiting your work and going back to Florence? I don't know if you want to tell us about your experience, maybe
I'm so glad
before.
nobody's tired of me mentioning it yet. They will be soon, I'm sure. So I went 10 years ago. I had made the very poor decision, uneducated decision of going to art school without looking for a proper teacher, like researching the people
Art
there
school,
and
college.
at college, yeah. So I'd gone to university. My parents knew nothing. Were like, if he goes to a top rated school, he will he'll do well and somehow become a very successful artist or whatever. And it was a waste of time. And I spent the following year in Miami, where my mother and father are based. And I just like lived at home, and I just had no direction. I had not been taught how to paint. I had made a couple of decent little paintings, but nothing to write home about, and I had learned nothing. And my parents were like, "Oh my god, he's at home." Like, holy shit! Like, I thought we'd send him off and he'd never come back. And like, oh, what do we do? And so we kind of sat down together, and we were just thinking of ideas of what we could do with this useless piece of paper. And they were like, "Well, there's no job for artists. Like, you're not an animator. Like, like you didn't do that. You're not an illustrator. You're not making inroads that way. You are a painter, and clearly there's something to be learned about painting. Well, did you know that there's this program at Saatchi where postgraduate students can take a year and learn how to conserve paintings?" And they were like, "Look, this is the best of both worlds. You'll be able to learn how the old masters painted, all of their methods, all of their everything, from how they stretched canvas, right, to where they put their nails, to how they primed the canvas, how they made pigment, and finally, of course, how these old masters painted. And at the end of it, there will be a job, maybe. I hope, please God." And at the end of it, I ended up doing my conservation course, and there's a lot of great stories and a lot of great places that I visited, and I was able to heal a lot of paintings that had been, holes, mold, abrasions of all sorts, rat and bat poop on them. There was a lot of cleaning and a lot of fixing and a lot of painting in and
Yeah.
patching. That was my job. And we got really lucky, but again, it's like I knew while I was there, like I was doodling during class, during these notes of like what to do and not to do, and I got all the information, but it was clearly not a fit. And my teacher saw this, and she was like, "Look, it's pretty clear to me, yes, that you are, you're an artist. Like, I like that you're here. You still get your degree at the end, and like I'm gonna make this all very easy for you because there's no reason for me to make this difficult." But she's like, "I think what you should do is I think you should do an independent study course for the latter half of this program, and I'm going to introduce you to a couple of friends of mine, and you're going to go and you're going to go work with them." She says, "I'm going to introduce you to a husband and wife team of pastisseurs. Pastisseurs are copycat artists. They're forgers. Art forgers are art forgers. They're criminals. These are the people that, by the book legally, make copies and reproductions of paintings that are famous and expensive. Mostly, I'd say maybe 70-60% of the time, it's just because someone wants a copy of a painting in their house and they really love painting and they're Italian, and that's that. But 30-40% of the time, it's because it's to protect an actual piece of cultural patrimony that, by Italian law, if you move into a house, like, paintings don't move hands in Italy. They stay where they are in order to make the conservation and upkeep of them manageable. So the rule is, if you move into, let's say, a villa and there's a work by Correggio on the wall, it's not going to happen. But like, let's say, that piece can live with you. I'm sure that adds to the cost of the house. However,
So, Andres, you studied with these people in Florence.
yes. Sorry, I'm sorry. I apologize. This is by law. You have to have people in your house if they want to see the painting. They have to see it within 2 weeks, and to protect the painting, you have a fake. So I studied with these fakers. Yes. Sorry. Thank you. We didn't communicate. We communicated through broken mix of Spanish and Italian, and because the Romance languages are all essentially rooted in the same place, right? We communicated, and I learned, and it was really beautiful because I was with someone that, like, we're talking about Picasso and Mozart. The wife of the husband and wife duo, it was actually her reproduction studio that she had inherited from her father. And while the husband was the male presenting side, I'm sure for, like, discussions and meetings and things like that, it'd be like, oh, her, you know what I mean? She was the genius, true genius. And you're around true genius when they do something so masterful, so quickly, and with a laugh like it's nothing, that it terrifies you, which happened multiple times, where I would be I was already a very, very draftsmanship, like drawing is really my skill set. So drawing a copy of the painting that I'd done, which was the Correggio's Education of Cupid by his parents Aphrodite and Hermes.
Yeah.
When I was doing the drawing, is easy, and they were like, "You clearly have an old hand." But when it came down to painting, I knew fuck all. So she would see me working like I was drawing, and she'd say, "Allora, Andres," and then she'd explain to me how to do it, and I'd look at her with these wild eyes, and she's like, "I will show." And so she would just fucking, like, let's say it's an eyeball. Yeah, eyeball's a very complex thing even to draw, but to paint it, to get the lids to look like eyelids and not these big heavy things, to use just the right amount of paint, for the eyelashes or the inside of sclera, is a masterful thing. And she made the fucking eyeball in 2 seconds, painted perfectly, got the skin tone perfect, had everything laid out, and then she's like, "Now you do." And I just looked at her
Now you do.
like she was the devil herself. I was like, "You're out of your fucking mind." But she taught me everything, from laying out my palette to the colors that old masters would use, which is a very expansive palette. And what that allowed me to do when I left, not only did I have a pretty decent copy of the painting I'd set out to copy, I also was able to respond in my own way to what I had learned, right? Which was like, for me, it's like, I like paintings with a fairly limited palette, so no longer did I have this palette that was like a dozen, 2 dozen colors strong. I had a triadic palette. 3 colors was more than enough, and I was able to do most of what she, most of what she tried to impart to me. But like, yeah, that was my experience, and so what was so funny is that experience was a lot of things. That was me bringing a painting. When I would I wouldn't leave this painting in their studio. Their studio was across the Arno. Their studio was across the river. So like every time that I would go to be in their studio to paint, I'd have to make sure the painting was dry or dryish, put it in a plastic bag, tie that bag. This is a big painting. It's like, I think it's like maybe like 20, like maybe like 30 inches by X amount of inches. Put that bag, tie a rope around it, put that rope over my shoulder, cross the busy streets of Florence where people live. They don't just tourist trap themselves, and
Yeah.
get to this little shop on the other side of the river, which all in all was about 45 minutes. And this could be in the rain, this could be in the cold, this could be in the fog, this could be on a very, very hot day. And yeah, it made Florence very physical. It felt like I was doing a pilgrimage, like a true artistic, spiritual pilgrimage to change myself, doing that that was like 3 times a week.
I
And
guess
going there now is different.
I was gonna say, I guess metaphorically, we're all on this pilgrimage to Florence now with the
Yes.
rest.
Oh my God, yeah.
I hate to cut you off, but as we're approaching an hour, I think we should wrap up. And if you have any final thoughts, I think,
Mm, no, guys, thank you, ladies, please, thank you so much for having me on. I have, I don't have any final thoughts. I'm just very excited. It makes me very emotional to be going back. I really, I'm bringing a couple of pieces to Firenze with me. Not just what we're working on in the residency, but like I'm really looking forward to going and feeling, you know, my past self. You know what I mean? It is going to be very spiritual. Like I'm going to be walking in a lot of memory going there, and I'm very excited to be doing that in such good company as you guys and everyone on the residency. It's going to change a lot of what Florence was to me. It was it was a young man, and it had Florence carries with it all of a young man's victories and fumblings. So I'm very excited now that I'm older and a different place in my life to see how I respond and remember or have misremembered parts of that visit, and to see how Florence responds to me coming back home.
Yeah, that's truly amazing. And I think very inspiring for people to hear about like your journey as an artist and kind of in a certain way going back like triumphant, is that
yeah,
Profian, yeah, yeah.
I think so, for sure.
And, and so sorry, I'm like the English to Spanish to English, it works. But yeah, and so I think it's amazing and very like inspiring. I think when Sinbad told me your story, I was like so excited about it. I was like, this is like we're doing the right thing. We're like giving the people the opportunity to like you said, like complete like their pilgrimage.
Pilgrimage, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
I'm
know
excited, and actually, we would love to have you back post Expo for another second interview so people can hear
how the expo
how
went behind the
everything went.
scenes.
That
So,
would be so cool. Be so cool. It's gonna be, guys. It's gonna be so amazing. I can't wait to try all the food with y'all. Sit down, and if everything goes as we seem to be planning it, I think there's gonna be a lot of excuses to have a lot of really meaningful and hopefully even life changing conversations amongst all of ourselves with, again, the requisite set and setting and substances of for this trip. It's going to be really fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, without further ado, thank you so much, Andrés del Vecchio, for coming to interview with us today. And I hope that everyone who's listening to this takes away a lot of important things that we were speaking about today.
And as always, wait and hope.
Wait and hope.
Wait and hope. Ciao.